Imagine the chief executive officer of your company just gathers the entire staff for this massive emergency meeting.
Okay.
He stands at the front of the room, looks everyone right in the eye, and announces that the firm is facing a hostile takeover.
Oh, wow.
Right. And not only that, but he reveals he is going to be personally indicted, ruined, and sent to federal prison so that the rest of the employees can keep their pensions.
That is heavy.
It is. The room just falls dead silent.
Hmm.
And then the vice president of sales raises his hand and asks you, so does this mean I get the corner office?
Oh, my goodness. That's terrible.
I know. But that level of sheer baffling selfishness is precisely what we see in the Gospel of Mark. Welcome to Reform Thinking.
Glad to be here for this one.
Yeah, we are jumping right into a brand new deep dive today,
Mhm.
examining a staggering piece of scholarly work by John K. Goodrich. It's titled Rule of the Congregation and Mark 10.3252, Glory and Greatness in Eschatological Israel.
Which is quite a mouthful, but the content is incredible.
It really is. We are looking at a moment where Jesus is predicting his own brutal, agonizing death and his closest followers.
The guys who have been with him through everything.
Yeah. They respond by arguing about who gets the best thrones in heaven.
Mhm.
For years, I read that text and assumed it was just, spontaneous human pride.
Right.
Just guys being arrogant.
Right, just a momentary lapse in judgment.
But this research shows their ambition was heavily calculated. It was driven by the intense religious expectations of their day.
Yeah, we are basically looking at a collision between two totally incompatible visions of reality.
Yeah.
On one side, you have these man-made, merit-based religious systems, and these systems always, without fail, result in a hierarchy of human glory.
They have to, right?
Precisely. They categorize people based on what they bring to the table, their pedigree, their knowledge, their physical capabilities even.
Right.
But on the other side, we have Christ's grace-based kingdom, which operates on an entirely different economy. In his kingdom, the king does not demand a pristine religious resume. Rather, he lays down his life for his people. And this distinction is really the bedrock of Reformed theology.
Absolutely, because we hold to the Westminster Confession.
Yes, meaning we believe humans bring nothing to their own salvation except the sin that makes it necessary.
That's such a good way to put it.
But the religious culture surrounding the disciples in the first century was built on the precise opposite premise.
It was all about what you could earn.
Yeah. To understand why James and John make such an audacious request for the chief seats, we really have to analyze the theological air they were breathing.
Right. But before we analyze their specific request, we have to establish the architectural layout of Mark's gospel.
Because context dictates meaning.
It does.
Yeah.
Always. The events we are analyzing happen in what scholars call the middle block of Mark. That spans from chapter 8, verse 22, all the way through the end of chapter 10.
And that's a very specific period.
Yet, this entire section tracks Christ's time on the road toward Jerusalem. He is on the move from Caesarea Philippi up in the north, heading south toward Judea, offering instruction on the way of discipleship.
And the literary structure here is incredibly deliberate.
It really is. Mark bookends this entire travel narrative with two specific healings of blind men.
Right, which is not a coincidence.
Definitely not. He starts in chapter 8 with a man at Bethsaida. And that healing is gradual. Jesus spits on the man's eyes, lays hands on him, and the man says he sees people, but they look like trees walking around.
He's not seeing clearly yet.
Right. Jesus has to touch him a second time to fully restore his sight.
Mm-hmm.
Then at the very end of chapter 10, the block closes with the healing of Bartimaeus, which is immediate and very public.
Throwing off the cloak and everything.
Yeah. It seems obvious that the physical blindness of these men is meant to highlight the worsening spiritual blindness of the disciples.
Oh, absolutely. The structure operates as this theological mirror.
Explain that a bit more.
Well, inside those two bookends of physical healing, Mark constructs three distinct narrative cycles.
Okay.
And in each of these three cycles, the precise same sequence occurs. First, Jesus plainly predicts his passion.
He spells it out.
He states unequivocally that he will suffer, be rejected by the elders and chief priests, be killed, and rise again after 3 days.
No parables, just straight fact.
Exactly. Then second, the disciples completely fail to grasp the meaning. They react with fear or denial or blatant ambition.
Like they're not even listening to the killed part.
Right. And third, Jesus responds to their failure by issuing a renewed call regarding the cost of following him. He corrects their misunderstanding.
Okay, so walk us through those 3 cycles.
Sure. So in chapter 8, after the first prediction, Peter actually takes Jesus aside and rebukes him.
Which is insane.
I know, prompting Jesus to say, "Get behind me, Satan."
Ouch.
Yeah. Then in chapter 9, after the second prediction, Jesus catches the disciples arguing on the road about which of them is the greatest.
While he's talking about dying.
I mean, the disconnect is wild.
Yeah.
And by the time we reach chapter 10, which is the climax of this third cycle, Jesus provides the most explicit detail yet.
Right.
He tells them that he will be handed over to the Gentiles, mocked, spit upon, and flogged, and the immediate response from James and John is to ask for a promotion.
It goes right back to that CEO analogy. You're going to prison? Great. Can I have your office?
That's precisely what they're doing.
It's like the disciples are basically tone deaf to the concept of a suffering Messiah.
They are.
They hear going to Jerusalem, and their minds immediately jump to military conquest and political thrones. They are anticipating a conquering king who will overthrow Roman occupation.
Right, the typical messianic expectation of the day.
But goes beyond just wanting to beat the Romans. Right. Their obsession with rank, seating arrangements, and who gets to be the greatest reveals a highly structured view of the end times.
Oh, it was extremely structured.
This didn't come out of nowhere. The blueprint for this kind of religious ladder climbing was quite literally written down in the desert decades earlier.
Yeah, this is where the historical context is so vital.
Right. Goodrich's research points us to the Dead Sea Scrolls, specifically to the writings of the Essenes at Qumran. And this shows us the exact blueprint of human merit that dominated the religious thinking of that era.
The Qumran community provides the perfect historical control group for understanding first-century Jewish expectations.
Because they were so strict.
Yeah, they were this isolated sect living in the desert near the Dead Sea, intensely focused on purity and preparation for the end time.
Very intense group of guys.
Extremely. And among the scrolls discovered in Cave 4, dating back to before 75 BC, is a document known as the Rule of the Congregation.
Or the Messianic Rule, right?
Right, cataloged as 1 QSA. It is a short text consisting of just 2 columns and 52 lines of Hebrew.
So not very long at all.
No, it was actually physically attached to a much larger document called the Rule of the Community. But this text is a literal, functional blueprint for the congregation of Israel in the end of days. It dictates how God's people are supposed to organize themselves when the Messiah arrives.
And it's not a grace-based organization.
Not at all. Their vision of the kingdom was hyper-stratified, based entirely on age, physical ability, and religious competency.
I am looking at the translation of 1 QSA here, and the age brackets are incredibly rigid.
Walk us through them.
Well, from youth, boys are instructed in a specific community text called the Book of Hagu. They learn the statutes of the covenant.
So they start them young.
Very young. And then, when a young man reaches 20, he hits his first major milestone.
Okay, what happens at 20?
He is considered an adult who knows good from evil, he is permitted to marry, and he registers as a citizen with his tribal clan.
But he doesn't have much authority yet, does he?
No, he is still at the bottom of the ladder regarding community influence. But 5 years later, at 25, he is allowed to enter the community militia. And he performs menial labor for the congregation.
Got to pay his dues.
Exactly. But the real shift happens at age 30. According to the scroll, when a man turns 30, he is finally permitted to draw near to decide legal cases and judgments.
He gets actual authority.
Right. He can take a firm stand among the heads of the thousands of Israel. He becomes eligible to be a ruler of hundreds, 50s, or 10s. He can act as a judge and a military officer.
That is a very structured ladder to climb.
It is. But hold on, if we are looking at this objectively, isn't it good to strive for maturity?
Sure.
I mean, the New Testament frequently tells believers to grow up in their faith, to move from milk to solid food. We have qualifications for elders in the pastoral epistles that require maturity and proven character.
That's true.
So where is the line between healthy discipleship and Qumran's toxic meritocracy? Why is this specific age bracket system so antithetical to the gospel?
That is a great question. The difference lies in the mechanism of justification and standing before God.
Okay, break that down.
Well, the pastoral epistles require character for leadership, right?
Right.
But they never suggest that your position in the church earns you a higher degree of salvation or a closer proximity to God's grace.
Ah, I see.
At Qumran, your rank was your righteousness. The document explicitly states that assignments were given according to a man's understanding, the perfection of his way, and his physical ability.
The perfection of his way.
Yeah. They weighed your piety and your knowledge, and that determined your eschatological worth.
So it's like Think of it like a modern credit score system.
Okay, I like that.
In a credit system, every financial mistake dings your score, and every timely payment raises it.
Right.
If your score is high enough, you qualify for the best mortgage rates. If it drops, you were denied.
That is a spot-on analogy. The Qumran community basically treated the coming kingdom of God like a cosmic mortgage application.
Wow.
If you studied the Book of Haggai perfectly, if you performed your militant duties flawlessly, your spiritual credit score went up.
Earning you a prime seat at the Messiah's table.
Precisely.
That credit score analogy perfectly illustrates the mechanics of works righteousness.
It does.
And if you build a system based entirely on earning your keep, you inevitably have to deal with the people who default.
Because not everyone is going to have a perfect score.
Right. A system of pure merit naturally creates a system of brutal exclusion. You cannot have an elite inner circle of high achievers without shutting the door on the people who fail to measure up.
And Qumran was very clear about shutting that door.
The exclusion criteria laid out in the rule of the congregation are just devastating.
Let's hear them.
The text states that anyone crippled in the legs or hands, anyone lame, blind, deaf, or dumb, is strictly forbidden from participating in the main meetings of the congregation.
They are completely barred from the council of the community.
Yes. If someone with these physical ailments has something to say, they cannot speak for themselves, they have to participate through intermediaries.
Because the logic was that bodily perfection was tied to spiritual purity.
Which is such a cruel way to view suffering.
It really is. If your physical body was broken, your spiritual credit score was permanently bankrupt, you were kept on the outside.
You literally couldn't get in the room.
And the severity of that exclusion is highlighted during the protocol for the eschatological banquet.
The great feast of the council.
Right. This was not just a community dinner.
Right.
It was the anticipated victory meal at the end of the age. And the seating chart was a strict theological hierarchy.
They mapped the whole thing out.
Oh, yeah. The scroll dictates precisely who enters the dining area and in what order.
So who goes first?
The priest enters first, acting as the head of all the congregation of Israel. He is followed by his subordinate priests.
Okay, all the religious guys.
Then, after the religious elite are seated, the Messiah of Israel is allowed to enter.
Wait, after?
Yes. Finally, the remaining laity enter. The phrase repeated throughout the text is that they sit and partake of the meal, each according to his glory.
So your glory was your rank.
It was your proven religious worth. When the bread and the new wine are blessed, the priest reaches out his hand first.
What?
Only after the priest takes his portion does the Messiah stretch out his hands to the bread.
Wait, hold on. If the priest takes the bread first, they aren't just predicting the arrival of the Messiah. They are structurally subordinating him to their own bureaucracy.
You caught that.
They have built a religion where they literally outrank God's chosen deliverer.
That is the Aaronic priesthood preserving its own administrative control, yes.
They are writing a script for the end of the world where they cast themselves in the starring roles, sitting at the very top of the pyramid.
It's astounding, isn't it?
That exposes the absolute arrogance of human merit. I mean, it is a system built by the healthy and the elite, designed to protect the healthy and the elite while keeping the broken completely out of sight.
It perfectly illustrates the theology of human achievement. In the ancient Jewish mind, specifically among these rigid sects, the coming kingdom was entirely about securing high social rank.
Status was everything.
Right. The priests at Qumran believed their spiritual authority superseded the royal authority of the Davidic Messiah.
Wow.
And if we carry that backdrop into Mark 10, the behavior of the disciples becomes entirely legible.
Okay, let's look at Mark 10 again.
Jesus has just told them he is going to be mocked, spat on, flogged, and killed.
Right.
Immediately, James and John approach him and say, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask."
Which is such an arrogant way to start a sentence.
It is, and their specific request is, "Let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in your glory."
They are operating on the Qumran frequency.
Yes. They are trying to lock down the highest possible eschatological thrones.
They are looking for the seats of maximum authority right next to the monarch.
Because they are anticipating the fulfillment of Old Testament prophecies.
Like Daniel 7.
Exactly, where the sovereignty and greatness of all the kingdoms under heaven are handed over to the holy people of the Most High.
So James and John believe this geopolitical kingdom is imminent. They assume that when Jesus arrives in Jerusalem, he is going to overthrow the Romans, establish his throne, and start handing out positions.
Rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds.
Right. They want to ensure that when the seating chart is finalized, they are placed at the absolute top, each according to his glory.
They want to outrank Peter, Andrew, and the rest of the 12.
It's a blatant power grab. Well, authority grab.
And Jesus responds to this raw political ambition by pointing them to the absolute sovereignty of the Father.
What does he say to them?
He tells them, "To sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared."
Prepared.
Yeah, the Greek word used for prepared indicates a completed action in the past with ongoing results.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Jesus is telling James and John that the kingdom of heaven does not operate like a worldly royal court where you can secure a prime position by lobbying the king for a favor.
You can't just schmooze your way to the top.
No. The seating chart of the kingdom was ordained from before the foundation of the world by the Father's eternal decree.
As someone holding to the Westminster Confession, that statement from Jesus is a massive theological anchor.
It really grounds the whole system of belief.
It does. The confession teaches that God from all eternity did, by the most wise and holy counsel of his own will, freely and unchangeably ordain whatsoever comes to pass.
Beautifully stated.
Meaning, human maneuvering cannot force God's hand.
Right.
You cannot network your way into the kingdom of heaven.
No, you cannot.
And since the seats are already prepared by the Father, Jesus shifts the focus away from their obsession with future glory and redirects their attention to what they will actually experience on earth.
Which is going to be very different from what they expect.
Yeah. He asks them a question that strikes right at the heart of their ambition. He says, "Can you drink the cup I drink or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with?"
And we know from the Old Testament prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah that the cup is consistently used as a symbol of God's wrath.
It is the cup of judgment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Similarly, the baptism Jesus references, being overwhelmed by floodwaters, is a metaphor for immense, life-threatening suffering.
So he's not talking about water baptism here.
No, the knowledgeable reader understands Jesus is referring to the cross. He is asking them if they are ready to endure the crushing weight of divine wrath and catastrophic suffering.
And their response is, we can.
So quick. We can.
Why are they so quick to agree to that? If we assume James and John have a basic understanding of Hebrew scriptures, they know the cup and the floodwaters imply severe trial.
Right.
Do they view this suffering as just another merit badge? Are they thinking of this cup as a military trial, a rite of passage they need to endure to finalize their Qumran-style resume and officially outrank Peter?
That is highly likely. They view the suffering Jesus mentions not as an atoning sacrifice, but as a final, grueling test of loyalty before the crowns are handed out.
Like boot camp.
Yeah. They're willing to endure a temporary military struggle if it guarantees them eternal political dominance. They say we can because they are supremely confident in their own merit.
Which is just so arrogant.
But notice, Jesus does not condemn their desire to be near him in the kingdom.
He doesn't.
No, he does not scold them for wanting the seats. Instead, he exposes their total ignorance regarding the nature of the kingdom's economy.
Okay.
He tells them, "You will drink the cup I drink and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with."
Basically saying, you will suffer, but not the way you think.
Right, and history verifies this. James was the first apostle martyred, executed by the sword of Herod Agrippa.
Wow.
And John endured decades of persecution and exile on Patmos. They were predestined to undergo this suffering.
But their motivation in that moment?
It's entirely competitive. They are volunteering for hardship solely to secure a higher rank than their peers.
That competitive drive immediately infects the rest of the group.
Of course it does.
The text says that when the 10 heard about it, they became indignant with James and John.
They were so mad.
And they were not angry because their theological sensibilities were offended by the sons of Zebedee.
No.
They were furious because James and John tried to bypass them in the hierarchy.
They wanted those prime seats for themselves.
Exactly. The entire apostolic band is operating on a merit-based, status-seeking mindset. Jesus has to gather all 12 of them together to completely overhaul their definition of greatness.
He really has to tear down their whole framework.
He does. He contrasts two entirely distinct models of leadership. He points to the secular geopolitical reality they live under every day. He says, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them.
Because the model of the Gentile rulers was built entirely on domination and extraction.
Right, the Romans.
The Roman Empire operated on a strict hierarchy where those at the top extracted wealth, labor, and compliance from those beneath them.
They just took whatever they wanted.
Yeah. The high officials acted tyrannically. The worldly definition of greatness was measured by how many people you could force to minister to your needs.
It was all about how many attendants you had.
Precisely. But Jesus shatters that paradigm. He looks at his disciples and says, "Not so with you."
Not so with you.
He issues a command that reverses everything they have learned from their culture. He states, "Whoever wants to become great among you must be your attendant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all."
That word. Using the concept of a bondsman or a slave in that culture was incredibly disruptive.
It was shocking.
A bondsman had no rights, no glory, no rank. They existed entirely to lay down their lives for the benefit of others.
Right.
Jesus takes the absolute bottom rung of the societal ladder and makes it the pinnacle of his kingdom.
It's the great reversal.
And he doesn't offer this as abstract moral advice. He points to himself as the ultimate proof of concept.
Yeah.
He says in Mark 10:45, "For even the Son of Man did not come to be waited upon, but to lay down his life as a ransom for many."
And that single verse, it contains the mechanics of substitutionary atonement.
Let's break that down because that is huge.
It is. The concept of the ransom highlights two specific Reformed doctrines: Christ's act of obedience and particular redemption.
Okay.
A ransom is a literal price paid to release captives. He did not come to provide a moral example.
All right, it wasn't just to show us how to be nice.
No. He came to execute a transaction. He paid the price with his own life. We mentioned earlier that the 30-year-old Qumran member was trying to fulfill the law perfectly to earn his seat.
Working on that spiritual credit score.
Exactly. But the doctrine of active obedience teaches that Christ actually did fulfill the law perfectly on behalf of his people.
He is the one who secured the perfect credit score.
Yes. And he imputes that righteousness to us.
That is incredible.
And then the doctrine of particular redemption means he laid down his life to secure the release of a specific people, the many he references.
The ones the Father prepared the seats for.
Yes.
When you understand the mechanics of that ransom, it completely dismantles the Qumran mindset.
There's nothing left of it.
You cannot bring your own merit to a king who had to bleed to buy you back.
It makes no sense.
If you could earn your seat through your own physical perfection and theological knowledge, the ransom would be entirely unnecessary.
Christ would have died for nothing.
Right. Jesus is teaching his disciples that true kingdom greatness is found in recognizing your own absolute spiritual bankruptcy, relying entirely on his ransom, and then reflecting that sacrificial love by acting as an attendant to your brothers and sisters.
Beautifully said. And Mark is such a brilliant narrator because he does not leave this massive theological overhaul as an abstract lecture on the road.
No, he grounds it immediately.
He grounds it in a historical event that serves as a living demonstration of everything Jesus just taught. This brings us to the final scene of the middle block of the gospel,
Which is just so perfectly placed.
Jesus and his disciples are walking the road toward Jerusalem, and they pass through Jericho.
Okay.
And sitting by the roadside is a blind beggar named Bartimaeus.
Okay, stop right there. Think back to the Dead Sea Scrolls and the rule of the congregation that we talked about.
The exclusion list.
Yes, we read the exclusion list. The blind, the crippled, the broken were specifically and explicitly banned from the inner circle of the eschatological community.
They couldn't even get close.
They were forbidden from drawing near to the council. Bartimaeus is the exact demographic that the religious elite of Qumran permanently disqualified.
He is the definition of an outcast to them.
In a merit-based system, Bartimaeus is a complete castaway. His physical blindness was viewed as a mark of spiritual deficiency.
A 0 credit score.
Exactly. If he had approached the meetings of the congregation, he would have been banished.
But the contrast here is so vivid. The Qumran priests would have told Bartimaeus to use an intermediary and stay far away from the holy feast.
Don't ruin our purity.
Right. But Jesus, the true son of David, hears this blind beggar crying out for mercy.
And what does he do?
Jesus does not ignore him. He stops on the road. The king of the universe halts his march toward the cross to minister to a blind beggar sitting in the dirt.
I love that.
Jesus calls for him, and Bartimaeus throws off his cloak, jumps up, and comes to him.
And Jesus asks Bartimaeus the exact same question. He asked James and John just a few verses earlier, "What do you want me to do for you?"
Oh, that's such a great parallel.
Right. James and John asked for thrones. They asked for glory and political dominion.
Because they thought they earned it.
But Bartimaeus asked for mercy. He says, "Rabbi, I want to see."
He knows he has nothing to offer.
And Jesus restores his sight. But the crucial detail is what happens next. The text says that immediately he received his sight and follow Jesus along the road.
He becomes a disciple right then and there.
He becomes a devoted follower, walking the path to Jerusalem. Bartimaeus is the living picture of true, grace-wrought discipleship.
He brings absolutely zero merit to the table.
None. He has no rank, no status, no book of Hagu to recite.
No impressive resume.
He only has a desperate need for mercy, and the king meets him with abundant grace.
That healing of Bartimaeus just entirely contradicts the merit-based hierarchy of Qumran.
It shatters it.
We have examined a massive gulf today between two distinct visions of reality. On one side, the rule of the congregation demands purity, isolates status, and offers exclusive glory only to those who can earn it through human capability.
Leaving everyone else in the dirt.
It leaves the broken sitting outside the gates. But on the other side, the Gospel of Mark reveals a Messiah who achieves greatness by giving his life as a ransom.
Yes.
He descends into suffering to pull the outcasts into the fold. He becomes the lowest of bondsmen so that the spiritually bankrupt can be adopted into the family.
So if you are listening to this, evaluate your own standing before God today.
That's the real question.
Are you subconsciously building a Qumran-style hierarchy in your mind?
Oh, it's so easy to do.
It is. Are you treating your sanctification like a spiritual credit score, hoping that your church attendance, your theological knowledge, or your moral performance will somehow earn you a better seat at the table?
Are you relying on the perfection of your own way?
Right. Or are you resting entirely with empty hands on the finished work of the King who paid the ransom to buy you back?
That's the difference between life and death.
If we rely on our own merit, we will find ourselves excluded. If we rely on his ransom, we find grace.
The human heart naturally gravitates toward earning its keep.
We want to be the ones in control.
We want to be James and John, securing our glory and comparing our resumes to those around us.
Look at my stats.
Exactly. But Christ calls us to recognize that we are Bartimaeus, sitting on the side of the road with nothing to offer, in desperate need of a Savior who stops for us.
I want to leave you with one final striking thought to mull over. Our source material notes that James and John asked to be placed on Jesus' right and left when he came into his glory.
They wanted those specific seats.
They wanted the thrones beside the king in his moment of triumph. But think about how Mark structures the rest of the story.
Okay.
Just a few chapters later, Jesus arrives in Jerusalem. He is mocked, he is beaten, and he is lifted up on a wooden cross.
The baptism he talked about.
Yes, that cross was his true moment of kingdom victory. It was a precise moment the ransom was paid. And when he was lifted up in his glory, who was placed on his right and his left?
Oh, wow.
It wasn't James and John.
No,
It was two condemned criminals bleeding out beside him. It is the ultimate subversion of human ambition and the absolute perfect display of God's staggering grace. Thank you for walking through this text with us today. We will see you next time.